There are certain nights when the human heart becomes very quiet, not because love has disappeared, but because it is waiting in silence, hoping it will not be misunderstood or taken the wrong way. And if these words have somehow reached you today, it may be because a part of your inner world is already tired of pretending that you no longer care. At the same time, another part of you still quietly hopes that someone, somewhere, is holding on to you with the same depth of feeling. Because the truth is, someone may love you more deeply than you realize, not in the loud or dramatic way that movies often show love, not through perfect timing or flawless words, but through hesitation, emotional confusion, distance, and silence that hides fear instead of a lack of feeling. Before you decide to walk away completely, there is something important you should understand. Some hearts do not stop loving you when they become silent. Sometimes silence is not the end of love. It is simply the last form of protection a person uses when they are afraid of losing something they cannot fully understand or express. Human beings are complex when it comes to love, especially when love feels real. We spend so much of our lives believing we want deep emotional connection, but the moment someone truly reaches the deeper parts of us, fear often begins to grow. Carl Jung spoke about the unconscious mind as if it were a hidden ocean beneath human behavior. When someone genuinely connects with you, they are not only connecting with your outer personality, they also begin to touch the hidden emotional layers inside you, the parts that were forgotten, ignored, or buried for a long time. Your insecurities, your unmet emotional needs, your loneliness, and your desire to finally be chosen without conditions all begin to rise to the surface. And when that happens, it changes people from the inside. It can feel overwhelming. It can shake their emotional balance. It can bring back old wounds they believed had already healed. This is one reason someone can truly care about you and still pull away at the exact moment you need reassurance the most. On the surface, it feels confusing, but on a deeper level, it is often psychological. Love is not only comfort. Love is also exposure. Love creates vulnerability. It is like standing emotionally open in front of another person and hoping they will not use your softness against you. Many people were never taught how to handle emotional closeness. They learned how to deal with disappointment. They learned how to stay strong. They learned how to hide their emotions. But they never learned how to safely receive love without fear. So when they begin to grow emotionally attached, something inside them starts to change in ways they do not fully understand. Your presence begins to affect their mood. Your silence becomes noticeable. Your attention becomes emotionally meaningful. And your absence feels much heavier than they expected. That can feel frightening for them, because once someone begins to affect your emotional world, your mind naturally starts to see risk. Losing them suddenly feels possible. Old fears of abandonment begin to return. Emotional safety starts to feel uncertain again. Many people mistake emotional distance for a lack of love. But emotional distance is often a sign of emotional overload instead. There are people who become cold because they do not care, and there are people who become distant because they care too much. The second type is harder to understand because their emotions and their actions do not match. One part of them moves toward closeness. Another part pulls away in fear. One part wants connection. Another part keeps asking, what if everything ends the way it ended before, even when nothing is actually wrong? Without realizing it, they begin protecting themselves from pain that has not even happened. Maybe you have noticed this pattern before, the emotional warmth followed by sudden silence, the inconsistency that never fully makes sense, the way they look at you when they think you are not paying attention, the way they remember small details about you without trying, the emotional tension that exists even during ordinary conversations, and still something feels unfinished, like something inside them is blocked. It can seem as though their emotions are moving toward you while their behavior keeps stepping back. This is often what unresolved emotional wounds look like. Most emotional pain is not loud or dramatic. It is quiet. It hides inside attachment patterns, fear of vulnerability, and emotional withdrawal. Some people begin pulling away the moment they start to care deeply because closeness unconsciously reminds them of pain they have not healed from. Maybe they were once abandoned by someone they trusted. Maybe they learned early in life that showing emotions leads to rejection. Maybe being vulnerable once caused them deep emotional pain, and now their nervous system treats intimacy as danger instead of comfort. The difficult part is that they may not fully understand this themselves. Much of human behavior is driven by the subconscious mind without clear awareness. So, a person can genuinely love you and still behave in a way that pushes you away. Their nervous system connects love with risk. Their mind wants closeness, but their fear reacts faster than their intentions. This is why emotionally mature love requires patience, not just passion. Passion is easy, it comes naturally, but real love requires emotional responsibility. It requires someone to slowly lower their defenses. It requires trust after disappointment. It requires staying emotionally open even when things feel uncertain. For many people, that feels extremely difficult because they have built their whole identity around emotional self-protection. It is also important to understand that silence is not always rejection. Sometimes silence is simply internal processing. Some people express emotions right away. Others turn inward when feelings become too intense. They withdraw into thought, confusion, or emotional overload. For people who are used to suppressing emotions, silence becomes their way of coping with emotional intensity. But this difference often creates misunderstandings. One person experiences silence as rejection. The other experiences silence as protection. One feels abandoned. The other feels overwhelmed. Slowly, even two people who deeply care about each other begin to drift apart. Not because love has disappeared, but because fear becomes stronger than communication. Many people give up too soon in situations like this. They mistake emotional complexity for emotional absence. They believe love should always be simple, clear, and consistent. But deep emotional connections are rarely that simple. They awaken older emotional layers inside a person. They bring hidden fears of abandonment to the surface. They expose insecurity. They reveal emotional wounds that were never fully healed. Carl Jung believed that love often acts like a mirror. It does not only show comfort, it also reflects the parts of ourselves we have not faced yet. This is why some connections feel so powerful. They awaken emotional awareness that had been hidden for years. They reveal how much someone fears being left behind, how much someone fears not being enough, how much someone quietly needs reassurance, and how much loneliness has been carried in silence for a very long time. At the same time, the other person may be going through their own inner struggle without showing it clearly. They may replay conversations in their mind while acting completely normal during the day. They may feel drawn toward you, but hold themselves back because pride or fear gets in the way. They may miss you while trying to convince themselves that keeping distance is safer. One of the hardest truths in human psychology is that people sometimes hurt the ones they love the most, because those are the only people who have the power to hurt them deeply in return. When you begin to see behavior through a psychological lens instead of only an emotional one, everything becomes more complex. Confusing actions are not always signs that love is missing. Sometimes they are signs of defense mechanisms, delayed replies, inconsistency, withdrawal after closeness, or emotional hesitation. These patterns are not always healthy, but they are very human responses to fear. Not every emotionally distant person is empty inside. Some are simply emotionally exhausted from trying to survive life while protecting themselves. Some carry silent emotional pain that no one has ever noticed. Some learn to be independent because depending on others once led to heartbreak. Some still long for closeness, but panic when it finally arrives. And yet, there is another truth that must be understood clearly. Love by itself is not enough if there is no emotional growth. You cannot fix another person's inner wounds through patience alone. You cannot keep sacrificing your own emotional well-being forever in the hope that your love will heal their fear. Real connection requires mutual emotional responsibility. Compassion is important, but so is self-respect. Understanding someone's emotional wounds should never mean losing yourself in the process. Emotional maturity in love does not chase endlessly. It does not beg for attention. Instead, it offers kindness without abandoning personal boundaries. It chooses honest communication over silent guessing. It gives space when needed, but it also values clarity, trust, and mutual effort. Healthy love grows where both people are willing to face their fears, learn from their past, and slowly build a relationship based on understanding rather than anxiety. That kind of love may not always be loud, but it is steady. It may not always be perfect, but it is real. And in the end, the strongest relationships are not built by people who never feel afraid. They are built by people who are willing to face their fears together instead of letting those fears decide the future of their connection. It does not sacrifice personal dignity just to feel chosen. Mature love knows how to be patient without abandoning itself. It knows how to care without losing its own identity. It knows how to understand another person without giving up healthy boundaries. Sometimes the most loving action is not forcing closeness, but allowing someone the space to face themselves honestly, because real change cannot be controlled from the outside. A person truly changes only when they grow tired of repeating the same emotional patterns within themselves. Maybe this connection in your life is not only about love. Maybe it is also about awareness, about understanding emotional patterns on a deeper level, about learning the difference between attachment and true emotional alignment. And maybe it is also showing you how often you ignore your own inner voice because you are afraid of losing someone who may not be emotionally available in the way you truly need. Think carefully about this. Have there been moments when your intuition quietly whispered the truth long before your mind accepted it? Moments when you sensed their real feelings beneath their words? Human beings are far more intuitive than they often realize. The subconscious constantly notices emotional energy, body language, emotional shifts, silence, eye contact, and nervous tension. Long before logic catches up, the deeper part of you often already knows. That is why certain people remain emotionally unforgettable, not because they were perfect, but because they awakened something that had been sleeping inside you, and awakening is rarely comfortable. Sometimes awakening arrives through longing, confusion, emotional distance that forces deep reflection, or through missing someone so deeply that you finally face the loneliness you had been trying to avoid. Pain has a strange psychological purpose. It removes illusions. It reveals emotional truth. It shows where healing is still needed. This is why some relationships completely change your inner world, even when they never become fully stable on the outside. They push you toward growth. They increase your awareness. They encourage emotional evolution. And perhaps this person is standing at the edge of that transformation as well. Maybe they are slowly realizing that emotional avoidance no longer protects them the way it once did. Maybe your absence has forced them to face feelings they tried to bury for a long time. Maybe they are beginning to understand that real love cannot survive forever behind silence and pride. Because eventually, every human being reaches a point where loneliness becomes heavier than the fear of being vulnerable. When that moment comes, people begin to change, not overnight and not perfectly, but little by little. They start noticing the emotional walls they built around themselves. They realize how often fear guided their decisions. They see how many chances for real connection they lost while trying to protect themselves from pain. And for the first time, they begin to understand that emotional safety cannot exist without emotional openness. This realization can transform a person in powerful ways. But while they move through their own inner journey, you must continue moving through yours. Do not allow uncertainty to destroy your sense of self-worth. Do not let another person's emotional confusion convince you that you are difficult to love. The way someone responds to intimacy often reflects their relationship with themselves far more than it reflects your value as a person. Many emotionally unavailable people are not holding back love because you are unworthy. They are holding back because they are afraid of needing someone, afraid of emotional dependence, afraid of rejection, afraid of losing control, afraid of being seen too clearly. And strangely, the more deeply they care, the more vulnerable they become. This creates a painful inner conflict. They want closeness while resisting it at the same time. Unless they consciously begin healing, they remain trapped between desire and fear. But you cannot carry the emotional weight for two people. You can love someone deeply and still choose emotional balance. You can understand someone's psychology without accepting endless emotional inconsistency. Compassion should never become self-destruction. This is one of the most valuable lessons emotionally aware people eventually learn. Love should expand your inner world, not slowly erase it. Even with all this complexity, there are still connections worth fighting for. Rare connections where two people slowly learn each other's fears with patience instead of judgment. Connections where emotional walls become softer over time. Connections where both people choose growth instead of ego. These relationships do exist, but they require honesty, accountability, vulnerability, patience, and emotional courage. Most importantly, they require two people who are willing to stop running from themselves. Because every relationship eventually becomes a meeting with your own inner self. You cannot truly love another person while remaining disconnected from your own emotional truth. This is why inner shadow work matters. Shadow work is not just spiritual language. In psychological terms, it means honestly facing the hidden parts of yourself. The jealousy you deny, the fear you hide, the loneliness you keep distracting yourself from, the emotional patterns you repeat without noticing, the wounds you pretend no longer affect you. Until these hidden parts are faced, relationships often repeat the same pain in different forms. Perhaps this person is finally beginning to face their own inner shadow because of you. Perhaps your love became too real to ignore, too emotionally honest, too deeply awakening to avoid. And even if they have not fully understood themselves yet, something inside them already knows your connection matters. Human beings do not struggle emotionally this deeply over someone who means nothing to them. Real emotional conflict usually exists where real emotional attachment exists. That is why indifference feels simple and cold, while love often feels complicated and alive. If someone truly does not care, their energy becomes calm and neutral. But when someone deeply cares while also fighting inner fear, their emotions become inconsistent, intense, and confusing. You can often sense this inner conflict without a single word being spoken. The emotional pull, the unfinished feeling, the quiet intuition that something genuine still exists beneath the silence. Maybe you have questioned yourself many times because of it. Maybe part of you has wondered whether you were imagining everything. But deep intuition rarely appears without a reason. The subconscious constantly notices emotional truths hidden beneath surface behavior. Still, intuition should always be balanced with wisdom. Do not romanticize emotional suffering forever. Do not become attached to uncertainty simply because intensity feels meaningful. Some people become trapped in painful emotional cycles because unpredictability creates psychological addiction. The nervous system becomes attached to emotional highs and emotional lows. After enough time, calm and healthy love can even feel unfamiliar or boring compared to chaotic attachment patterns. This is why healing changes attraction. Emotionally healthy people stop chasing confusion just to feel alive. They begin appreciating consistency, honesty, emotional safety, and peace. They stop mistaking emotional unavailability for emotional depth. They stop believing love must be earned through suffering. And maybe this entire experience is slowly leading you toward that understanding as well. Because sometimes life does not bring someone into your world simply to complete you. Sometimes it brings them to transform you, to raise your standards, to strengthen your emotional awareness, and to remind you that your heart deserves reciprocity, not confusion. At the same time, transformation takes time for everyone involved. If this person truly loves you, they may be fighting inner battles that no one else can see, battles between old wounds and new hope, between fear and desire, between self-protection and emotional surrender. Maybe right now, they are somewhere alone, replaying memories of you in their mind, wondering whether it is already too late to come forward honestly. The human heart often carries regret more heavily than rejection. Many people avoid vulnerability in the present only to later realize that their silence became the very reason they lost someone important. Never underestimate how deeply people can feel emotions they struggle to express. Some of the deepest love stories remain hidden beneath quiet behavior, not because silence is ideal, but because human beings are imperfect, shaped by their past while still longing for real connection. That is what makes love both beautiful and painful at the same time. Two wounded people trying to trust each other while carrying invisible emotional scars. Two nervous systems shaped by different life experiences. Two inner children silently asking the same question, will you still stay if you truly see who I am? And maybe that question lives at the center of this connection as well. Because beneath pride, beneath silence, beneath fear, and beneath confusion, there is often simply a person who is afraid they are not enough for the one they love. Many people secretly believe they will eventually disappoint the person they care about. They fear that once someone truly knows them, they will no longer be loved in the same way. That hidden belief quietly shapes their actions, causing them to pull away even while their heart still longs to stay close. Until they face that fear honestly, love and fear continue pulling them in opposite directions, leaving both people caught between hope and uncertainty.